First up on the show is Skylar Moon, an investor, entrepreneur, and owner of DZީR Night Club here in San Antonio. Skylar, I'm excited to have you on the show. You even dress nice.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So you have got quite the entrepreneurial kind of background here. So you launched 42 Boost mobile locations, right? That's back when we'll get into that, into the cellular industry. Sales over $20+ million a year, which is amazing. I thought I was doing good at $250,000, right? I was all, I'm a $250,000 now, and $20+ million a year. You bought a failing nightclub during COVID and 10x sales, and then you discovered a tax hack through the laundry business. And I definitely want to get into that. I always like tax advantages, you know. So tell me a little bit about your backstory. How did you get involved in sales? Where did this all start? Let's move through it fairly quickly so we don't.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick 5-minute rundown.
Sure.
So when I was younger, I actually moved out of my house around 15 years old. And so everything was fine at home. Just I was very stubborn. And you know how it is when you're a teenager and you think you know what you want and what you're going to do. And parents have a different idea for you. So anyways, did that. And, you got to hustle. At some point, you got to, be able to pay your own bills. And, so I made up my mind. That's what I was going to do. And so finished out high school, didn't go to college, but, started mowing lawns and just doing odds and end jobs, trying to make ends meet. Ended up running over my cell phone with the lawnmower, and then that's how I got into the cell phone business. So I ended up meeting a guy that owned a Crükus store at the time.
What year is this?
Wire. This is 2008.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a while back. And so met a guy who had his own shop, and he sold me a phone, and then I just got real interested in that business and saying, man, I mean, if you can make, $15, $20, because I was buying phones off eBay and going to sell them to them. So I'd buy a phone for $90, sell for $120 or $130 or whatever. And I'm like, well, shoot, if I could figure out how to do this more often, I wouldn't have to be outside, burning up, mowing lawns, making $20, $30, right? It's the same profit margin, but way less effort and a lot more scalable, right? So I'm thinking, man, I got to figure this thing out. So I started working on that, figured that out, ended up opening up my first store right out of high school. Off of Walls and Montgomery Road, right where the HEB's at over there.
Okay.
And got really lucky on it. I mean, it just seemed like it was meant to be. I don't know if you know much about commercial leasing. I know you know a lot about commercial leasing. For an 18-year-old that has no credit and no money and has no experience and, basically doesn't offer anything, just trying to put something together, it's really hard to get a commercial lease. Well, he ended up giving me, a sweetheart deal. Gave me a couple months free rent because the place was pretty shoddy and needed some work to be done to it. So put some money on some credit cards, built up, went to Home Depot, bought, all the materials we needed, and basically built a store, me and a buddy of mine, and started off doing used phones, just selling used phones. We'd buy them, kind of like used car business. We'd trade them in whenever the new phone was ready. Because at that point in 2009, 2010, cell phones were pretty, other than the flip phones, smartphones were really new. I mean, if you think about it, iPhone barely got launched in 2008. So I'm right in that kind of era where people were starting to really look into trading in their flip phones and getting into a smartphone, right? And so I took advantage of that wave and did that business for a while. Somehow one of the Boost representatives ended up coming into my store because my store wasn't like a branded retail store. It was just,
What was the name of it?
Moon Mobile. Yeah, so last name's Moon, right? So Moon Mobile. It's kind of catchy, 90% of the business was driven through Craigslist at the time. That's back in the good old Craigslist days. Again, there was no Facebook Marketplace. There was, eBay was, it was around still, but it wasn't the hottest thing anymore. So Craigslist drove a lot of our business and, had got our walk-ins that way. So then somehow one of the Boost representatives, heard about our location, walked in and said, hey, do you want to start selling Boost? I had never heard of it, didn't know what it was. I was like, well, what is this? What's your prop? What are you trying to sell me? And he said, we get, branded phones, warranties. You don't have to worry about, dealing with phones that are broken all the time. They're brand new. And then you make, I think it was like at the time, like 25% of whatever the customer's monthly payment was. So a customer comes in and pays $100 for the bill. You keep $25. I was like,
and now you're talking recurring revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I said, sign me up. So I signed up with them. And after a year.
What would you make on a sale of a phone?
So the phones weren't much. It's about $25. So
okay. And then you're getting $25
on the recharge, depending on how much their monthly bill was.
Sweet, man.
Yeah, it was a good deal back then. It was a really good deal. And so I ran with that. So I was still doing, at that point, it was what they would call like a multi-carrier phone. So you had, or a phone store, you would have, their brand, plus you were still selling, other products and stuff.
Sure.
So after about a year, they said, hey, we want you to come exclusive with us. And I said, well, I'm making a lot of money kind of with other products too. So I promised them a secondary location. So I did a second location off of Babcock and 410. And then I ended up doing another one off of Nacogdoches. Anyways, from there, it just grew on and on and on. And
Was
really,
it a good move going with them as like?
yeah, so my thing with that is in the business that I was in the repair business and the used phone business, you are the guy driving the business, right? You're doing the repairs yourself. You're doing the, evaluating if this phone is worth so much on trade-in, how much you can retail it for. And so you're really stuck working in the business, as we mentioned earlier, right? And so I always wanted to look, ahead and how can I scale and how can I get bigger? I've always had pretty big ambitions and wanted to, didn't really know where I was going to go, but I knew that I wanted to, be involved in business and have business and be able to scale it and make it bigger.
Nice.
And so with the retail model with Boost, it's something you can copy and paste. It wasn't a franchise model. They called it like an authorized retailer, but it's basically a franchise. They give you a contract and say, hey, the store needs to look like this, feel like this. Here's the hours you have to operate, blah, blah, blah. So, it's basically a franchise. And so with that, there's enough structure that you can copy and paste and move on. Whereas with the original business that was repairing phones, you teach somebody how to do it, and then they're making you, 300% margin, and they're just getting paid an hourly rate or a commission or whatever. They're basically they want to go off and do it on their own. And so it's really hard to copy and paste that model.
You were killing it though at the cell phone game.
Oh, yeah.
You'd open multiple locations. You're making higher margins. And now if we look at today, you're in a wildly different place. You own different types of businesses that don't seem to have anything to do with each other. So what was that transition?
So I was stuck in the phone business for about a decade. And as the years went on and more people had, there was saturation in the market, more people had cell phones. Everybody's got a phone from your 6-year-old, to the elderly folks. Everybody's got a phone. So there's really no new customers out there, right? So at this point in the wireless industry, it's just, how do we get people to switch back and forth? So it's a really not a very profitable business for the retailer anymore. For the carrier, they've still got the recurring revenue every month. But for a retailer who's having to bring in new business every month, it is extremely difficult. So they've also crunched our margins. So I said all that, and then by the time COVID comes, I'm looking at this thing. I've always tried to have a at least 5-year outlook, what's coming up in the future. And you can kind of just see, being in retail, having 40 some odd stores with COVID being around is probably not a great idea, right? It's probably not something you want to get stuck in. And so I had some early intuition, and I got lucky, found a guy out of Houston, bought about 65% of that business. And then I just really took some time off. I had worked for about a decade, just all day, every day, didn't really take much time off, was building that business. Like I never really raised money from any private investors, from banks, never took a bank loan until after 10 years of being in business. And so every store we opened was just from profits that were coming from the original stores and turning those over. And so I worked a lot. And so I took about a year off and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so we were obviously in the middle of COVID as well, right? And so, again, thinking in the future, what's probably struggling right now? What's a business that's struggling that I can get into? Because I made a pretty good exit, so I had some cash I was sitting on, playing with the market. Obviously, the market did some fun things during COVID. It dipped a lot, and then I took a lot of that and, was able to turn that around. So I had some good successes, even while being, off work. So just looking, we thought restaurants, but I didn't really want to get in the restaurant space. I know it's a hard space, and I wasn't, I'd already worked a lot. I didn't want to go right back into something like that. And so just really took our time to think about something. Originally, it was a bar. Let's do a bar, right? And so I was looking at doing that. And then one thing led to the next. I know some people in the nightlife business, and they ended up hooking me up with, it was Lush Rooftop was the name of the club that I ended up buying. Been there for, 6 or 7 years or so, and got hooked up with the owner. And sure enough, COVID kind of did them in. You got really expensive rent. You got a lot of overhead, and you just couldn't open at the time, right? Or you could minimally open. And so took that opportunity, made the purchase. I kind of knew what I wanted to do with it. As soon as we bought it, closed it down, rebranded it, renamed it. We had a vision of being kind of like a Vegas-style nightclub as far as the production and whatnot goes. So we invested a lot into like the lighting and the sound equipment, more so than what most other clubs here in town do. And so that was the vision we had. And, I didn't know what I was doing. I just said, I'm going to go after it. And I surrounded. One thing I've done really well in my career is surround myself with the right people, right?
There you go.
And so you need a really good bar manager, somebody who's been around forever and knows what they're doing, especially since I don't know what I'm doing in that industry. You needed a good light and sound production guy because that was kind of the draw of the club. Obviously I don't know anything about that. And so you just put the right people in place, and I had a lot of good advisors and people around me, and we executed really well, and it ended up turning out amazing.
How are you finding these people?
So there's a bunch of different avenues, right? A lot of it is, as you get bigger in business and people kind of know about you, people want to be on your team, right? So that's one thing about, one, treating people well. It's just the basic stuff that you should do. Treat people well, pay them right, pay them on time, treat them like humans, be friends with them rather than just, a dictator to them, right? So that's one way to do it, is being somebody that people want to work for, right? And then you've got your traditional tools. You've got Indeed and stuff like that. So it's a combination of both. A lot of word of mouth, a lot of people just know who I am now at this point. And so if I ever need to hire somebody, I can just put a real quick Instagram post, hey, looking to hire this position, and I'll get just tons of DMs from, friends and family, just people who follow me, people I don't even know, hey, hit up this guy. That's how we found one of our chefs at the restaurant we just opened, same type deal. We jumped into the restaurant space, had no idea what we were doing there, but, did our research on the back end, kind of figured out, okay, these are the key people we need in place, here's what you need to do. And so, we did some of the traditional hiring through Indeed. Once you get 1 or 2 employees, typically in an industry, so if it's the bar industry or whether it's, the car lot industry, whatever it is, typically people know each other, right? So again, if you're a nice guy and you're fun to work for and you offer good pay and good benefits, typically, people know each other in that industry. So once you get your foot in an industry, typically, if you're doing the right things, you can pretty easily attract talent.
So tell me about the laundry business and why did you do that?
Yeah. So laundry is fun. So I was in the nightclub business, and obviously, you start flowing a lot of cash. Well, then with that is the burden of having to pay a lot of tax, to the government at the end of the year. And so I started just researching strategies online, and I found an online business influencer who was talking about laundromats. And the reason he did it was for the same reason. He had a big Airbnb business, flowing a bunch of cash, but needed to figure out a way to mitigate some of those taxes. And so the laundry business. So with the laundry business, my 3 favorite things in it: 1, it's a really easy business to run. There's not a ton of employees, right? You've got a couple people on site and maybe 1 manager per location. So it's not rocket science. There's not a whole lot of stuff that can go wrong other than, maybe the clothes doesn't get dried fast enough or gets bleached or whatever. But it's not anything major. Like in the cell phone industry, it's all day, towers are down. There's, payment issues or whatever, right? So it's a really easy business to run. Number 2 is it flows cash pretty well, and it's pretty consistent. So it's not going to be something to where it's not super seasonal. It's pretty consistent throughout the year. People are always washing their clothes. It's a business that's been around forever, and so it doesn't really seem like it's going away, especially if you've got a good location around apartment complexes or places that don't typically have, their own washer and dryer. And then there's other ways to pick up the business. We're now doing like wash and fold where people come and drop off. We're offering a service. We'll come to your house. You want to leave a bag on your front porch, so kind of like a DoorDash deal. You want to get on demand, your clothes clean. You don't want to do it, for $50, $100, depending on how much laundry you have. We'll come out once a week to your house, pick it up, wash it, fold it, have it in an airtight bag, then send it right back to your house. And so basically that chore is knocked out for you, right? So that's one way you can grow it as well. And then my third favorite reason, the reason I got into the laundry business, because of the tax benefits you get from
explain.
it.
Yeah, that's a little bit more.
Yeah.
So what's the tax?
So the tax benefit is there's a code in the tax law, kind of like I'm sure you all have heard about when you buy a SUV that's 6,000 pounds or more, you can deduct the whole SUV year 1, right?
I heard that on TikTok. I didn't know if that was real.
It is a real deal, and
Really?
it's the same type of thing that applies to this. So with the equipment in the laundromat, you can write off. If you're buying an existing laundromat, you just have to structure your contract correctly to basically allocate a certain amount. So if you're buying, I'm just going to throw out random numbers. If you're buying $1 million laundromat, right, how much of that is worth in equipment, right? So if it's $800,000 or $900,000, whatever you can agree upon on the sale of how much is actually equipment, y'all fill out a form. I don't know what form it is, F53 something, that goes to the IRS. But basically, y'all agree and say, hey, out of that $1 million, $800,000 is allocated towards the equipment, and $200,000 is just goodwill, right? Just repeat customers that are coming in. And so with that, whatever y'all allocate, you can deduct 100% bonus year 1 on the equipment. And so basically, if you've got a business that's flowing, a couple $1 million in cash, and you're going to have a high tax bill, you can then take off, that entire amount year 1. The second part is if you end up buying the building. So now I'm getting to it where I'm not only buying, existing laundromats, I'm starting up my, new laundromat. So I have to already purchase the equipment. So then at that point, you know what the purchase price is. Whatever the manufacturer charges you, that's what the purchase price is. That gets deducted year 1. And then number 2, if you're buying the real estate, you also get tax advantages from purchasing the real estate, right?
So what I love here is I think a lot of business owners, they really rely on their accountants and their CPA to give them tax advice. But one thing that I've noticed, there are a few very great exceptions, but it's a rare CPA that's going to go out of their way to inform you of creative options in your taxes. So what I love hearing here is like you found options, and you probably have a CPA doing it. Let's be honest, none of us want to do that. Those forms,
too much risk.
I wouldn't do it correctly. But you've built a business structure that you've got the cash flow over here, and you've got the U.S. tax codes, tax shelter area. It's legal. It's a great way to work your taxes.
And CPAs typically aren't there to help you save on taxes. They're typically there to make sure that you're filing correctly and that you or them are not going to get in trouble from the IRS. So like I work with ADKF here in town. They're probably one of the bigger firms in town. I think they've got I don't know, like 55 CPAs on staff. And so when I brought this strategy to them, they looked over and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So it wasn't something like, you know, they're not proactively telling people about this. They probably weren't even thinking about it, right? Because typically CPAs are the ones that are just making sure stuff is getting filed correctly, right? So what I try to recommend to people who are in business is, you know, have your CPA, that's fine. Don't rely on them for tax strategy. Hire a tax strategist, right? So there's a lot of tax strategists out there who are different from CPAs. They really don't, you know, some of them will, you know, be CPAs and file your taxes for you, but a lot of them are just, hey, meet with us once a quarter or, you know, twice a year, and let's see what businesses you're in, what you're doing, and then we can give you different strategies that you can look at to save taxes. So typically, you know, for a good entrepreneur who's making a lot of money, you probably do want to go two different routes, right? Have your CPA, that's fine, and, you know, they can give you some tips, but also go out and find you a good tax strategist who can help you strategize on how to save taxes, because there's a bunch of different ways out there.
Sweet.
That's a
Skylar,
key bit of advice, yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
we are up on your segment for sure, but if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that? Your
You can follow
Instagram's
me.
huge.
Yeah, Instagram's a good one. So any social media platform, it's all the same. It's at and then Skylar B Moon. So my first name, Skylar B Moon.
Awesome.
Find me there.
I think you got over 280,000, I think, followers, so you know what
Pretty
you're doing
much
over there.
nothing.
I
Anyway.
think that's a very valuable email that you just gave out, and for entrepreneurs looking to do what you're doing, I mean, it just takes one story that people hear and they're like,
Yeah.
I could do that too, for them to get started on their journey. So I think that's really inspirational.
You know, for me, what stands out with Skylar and capitalism at its finest, Skylar, is if I don't have the data on this, but 15-year-olds that move out on their own, the likelihood of them being successful as you versus the streets, drugs, alcohol, pretty impressive. So good for you. And, you know, sharing your story could be inspiring to you know, other people out there.
Yeah, that's the goal.
And it's not like you're doing anything real textbook savvy out of you're just doing pretty basic stuff. You listen to a guy probably maybe on TikTok on the personal coach regarding your regular CPAs and you know, typical businesses. Now, I don't know about the laundromat anymore because, well, hell, now you have a restaurant. That may take care of all that for you.
Yeah.
But really nice story. I'm glad to be part of it.
Yeah, and that's what I've always said on different podcasts, different things I've been on, is I'm just the most regular guy in the world who's, you know, is out here trying to, you know, one, make $1 for ourselves, and then, you know, help other entrepreneurs and help people that, you know, are wanting to get into business and you know, make more than just a 9 to 5 out of their lives.
It's a hustle, right? We've
You
got
don't
to
need
hustle.
an MBA.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the key
it's
to
a
it.
hustle.
Have a work ethic.